"Help me, brother," I whispered, as I stumbled to my brother's place in the dead of a freezing winter night. My clothes were tattered, and I cradled a baby in my arms. My brother's face went pale at the sight of me, frail, disheveled, clad only in a ragged shirt and barefoot. "What on earth happened?" he exclaimed, quickly ushering me inside and warming up the room. The baby, wrapped snugly in my jacket, slept soundly, but it couldn't stop shivering. "Who did this to you, my precious little sister?" my brother muttered through clenched teeth. "Lily, it's going to be okay now." Upon hearing his gentle voice, a wave of relief washed over me, and it felt as if all my strength had drained away. "My name is Lily. I'm a 27-year-old homemaker with a young son. I used to be a nurse, but I left my job when Terry, the son of the hospital director where I worked, proposed to me. I was drawn to Terry's kindness and his efficient work style. I have a brother, Derek, who is 5 years older than me. Our family consists of Derek and our grandparents since our parents died in a car accident when I was 4 and Derek was in 3rd grade. A truck driver, who had fallen asleep at the wheel, collided head-on with their car. My mother, a nurse, had been working late, and the accident happened when my father went to pick her up. Derek often recalls our father's last words before leaving that night. "Derek, I'm counting on you to take care of Lily." What might have been a casual request turned into a lifelong commitment for my brother. He has never let me down, always protecting me like a superhero. After the accident, it seemed we would be sent to separate foster homes, but our paternal grandparents, with whom we had little contact before, stepped in to take us. Our grandfather, with his white hair and long bushy beard, looked just like Santa Claus. When he first saw Derek, he muttered, "You're the spitting image of your father," and I believe I saw tears in his eyes. Our grandmother, a kind woman, hugged me tightly and sobbed, "Poor child." Later, I learned that our father had a falling out with our grandfather and left home, seeking freedom instead of continuing the family business. This led to a long estrangement, but our grandparents took us in despite the past. We moved to their home nestled in the rural mountains. Our grandfather, a renowned potter whose works fetched thousands of dollars, and our grandmother, whose kindness knew no bounds, raised us without financial difficulties. Under their care, Derek and I grew up happily. Derek went off to a prestigious university in the city, while I attended nursing school. We both pursued our dreams until our grandmother's health began to decline. Derek, who had been working in the city, returned home to help care for her. I wanted to return home too, but since I was still a student, Derek advised against it. Derek had always been interested in our grandfather's work, but our grandfather had firmly encouraged him to follow his own path, which led Derek to attend university. I believe our grandfather regretted forcing our father to continue the family business and didn't want his grandchildren to go through the same experience. However, Derek insisted on learning pottery from our grandfather. He had always been handy and pottery suited him well. Besides, Derek excelled in everything: academics, sports, and he was popular among his friends. He was truly a superhero. While taking care of our sick grandmother, Derek also learned the trade from our grandfather. After I graduated from nursing school, I started working as a nurse. It was then that Terry proposed to me and we got married. Our wedding was grand, and the joyous smiles of Derek and our grandfather are what I remember most. Derek brought pictures of our parents to the wedding. "We all just want you to be happy, Lily, including our late mom and dad," he said, shedding tears openly. Our grandmother, too ill to attend, cried tears of joy when she saw the video of the ceremony. I was truly blessed with a great family. I quit my job as a nurse, moved into Terry's family home, and began to support him as a full-time homemaker. We had a child, and my husband was kind. We were living a happy life. Until then, my life had seemed to be smooth sailing. I couldn't even imagine the hellish days that were to come. Not long after, my grandmother passed away. Terry attended the funeral with me and comforted me. My grandfather's disappointment was severe. I couldn't find the words to speak to him. While I was busy supporting our grandfather, my brother Derek delved deeper into his pottery. Half a year had passed when I found myself fleeing to Derek's place in the middle of a freezing winter night, wearing nothing but ragged clothes, holding a baby in my arms. As Derek beheld my drastically changed appearance, he was rendered speechless. I stood there, so thin and weak, clad only in a tattered shirt, barefoot. "What on earth happened?" he finally managed to say, ushering me inside and warming up the room. The baby, wrapped in my coat, slept soundly, but I couldn't shake off the shivers that racked my body. Who did this to my dear sister? Derek muttered through clenched teeth. A wave of relief washed over me upon hearing his voice, as if all strength had drained from my body. I didn't want to burden Derek or our grandfather, but I had no choice. I had to tell them. I began to recount the events at my in-laws' house. Terry and I had been living together, but due to my in-laws' insistence that I rest during and after pregnancy, we moved in with them. My in-laws, both remarried, welcomed us warmly. My father-in-law's kindness was particularly touching, as I had no father of my own. However, my mother-in-law seemed to harbor resentment. "You're flirting with my husband, aren't you, you disgusting woman?" she accused, launching into a campaign of verbal and physical abuse. She disparaged my upbringing, asserting that I could never blend in with their family's affluent background. As if that weren't enough, I found myself facing additional challenges due to a shortage of staff at the hospital. As a former nurse, I often found myself called in to assist at the hospital alongside my husband, Terry. However, during this time, I noticed something deeply unsettling. Terry, being the son of the hospital director, took it upon himself to reprimand the nurses in an unreasonable manner. "Move quicker. You're a nurse getting paid, aren't you? Don't slack off just because my father is lenient. Once I take over this hospital, I won't be so forgiving," he would bark at them. His harsh words towards the hardworking nurses were unreasonable and unjust. Attempting to intervene, I interjected, "Terry, don't you think that's too harsh? Everyone here is trying their best." Unfortunately, my husband didn't take kindly to my interference. In front of the other nurses, he flew into a rage, furious that I had dared to stand up to him. Since that incident, Terry became distant towards me, perhaps influenced by my mother-in-law, who had been insinuating from the start that I was too soft on your wife and that I was taking you for granted. Meanwhile, my father-in-law, though unable to openly oppose his wife, did what he could to protect me. Unfortunately, when my father-in-law fell seriously ill and became bedridden, the situation worsened. Seizing the opportunity, my mother-in-law made me take on all the household chores, treating me like a mere housekeeper. I found myself juggling caring for my son, cooking, laundry, and cleaning, all while enduring mistreatment. Even in front of my ailing father-in-law, my mother-in-law's cruelty knew no bounds. "Please don't speak to Lily that way," he would weakly protest, only to be met with her venomous retorts. Her abuse escalated, and I found myself being deprived of basic dignity. "Housekeepers don't eat with the family. Eat the leftovers later," she commanded, forcing me to subsist on scraps. Despite the hardships, I endured it all for the sake of my son and my ailing father-in-law. I was so distraught that I lost my appetite. When I glanced in the mirror, I was taken aback by the gaunt and worn reflection staring back at me. My husband's words cut deep. "I only married you because you were somewhat attractive, but I never imagined you become such a disheveled woman," he sneered, insisting that I relocate from our bedroom to the storage room. The cruelty was staggering. The verbal abuse didn't stop with me, it extended to our son. "Of course he's not smart. Look at who his mother is," my mother-in-law would scoff. "His constant crying is annoying. Make him stop right now," my husband demanded. It felt like something inside me had snapped. Determined to escape, my sole concern was my father-in-law's well-being. However, to my surprise, he urged me to flee to my brother's place. Pressing several $100 bills into my hand, he insisted I leave immediately. Without hesitation, I wrapped my son in my coat and hailed a taxi with the money my father-in-law had given me. I rushed to my grandfather's house, where I poured out the entire ordeal to him and my brother Derek. Derek, his usually calm demeanor replaced by a furious expression I had never seen before, clenched his fists in anger. Assuring me that things would be okay, he said, "You've been through so much. It's time to relax." Overwhelmed with emotion, I broke down in tears. Even my grandfather, typically reserved, muttered, "I can't forgive this." A few days later, leaving my son under my grandfather's care, I made the decision to return to my in-laws' house with Derek to retrieve my belongings. Having left abruptly without a word, I anticipated trouble upon our return. My husband greeted me with a cold gaze and muttered, "You finally returned, huh?" Derek, maintaining his composure, calmly stated, "My sister seems very distressed, so we'll be taking care of her for a while. We've come today to collect some of her personal belongings." To this, my husband retorted, "I married her, so if she doesn't come back, there will be no one to do the chores. That's a big problem for me." Looking down on Derek, my mother-in-law remarked, "I heard you do pottery. It must be a tough life. Even if you take care of my daughter-in-law, it's going to be difficult for you, right? Please send her back. It's a problem for us too. I could see Derek struggling to contain his anger as we requested to retrieve our belongings. Directed to a storage room in the corner of the hallway, which served as my room, we found it cramped and neglected. Cardboard boxes and old appliances cluttered the space, with only a few changes of clothes for me and my son. There were no heating appliances, just a thin blanket and mattress. Derek, visibly shaken by the harsh conditions, confronted my mother-in-law. "Is this where you've shoved my dear sister and her child?" Her reply was callous. She should be grateful just to have a room. She's just a housekeeper after all. Eager to leave, yet concerned about my father-in-law, I wished to see him. He greeted me warmly and quietly handed me something, expressing his regret for not being able to protect me. For several days, we made preparations, and with my grandfather and Derek by my side, I returned to my in-laws' house. Determined to stand up for my son, I knew I couldn't keep running away forever. Upon arriving home, I handed my husband the divorce papers. His initial surprise quickly turned to defiance as he declared he wouldn't pay alimony or child support, claiming I had chosen to leave. To support my case, I played a recording in front of his mother, an audio documenting her belittling me and him shouting abuse. "This is evidence of the abuse I suffered," I informed them. Their shock was palpable as they asked when I had even recorded this. It turned out my father-in-law had discreetly recorded everything to help me, passing the recording to me when I collected my belongings earlier. My brother Derek, who had graduated from law school and passed the bar exam while assisting our grandfather, assured me that I had grounds for divorce. He promised to fight for me wholeheartedly. As the tension escalated, my wheelchair-bound father-in-law appeared, handing divorce papers to my mother-in-law. He, too, had recorded the verbal abuse he endured and was now ready to divorce. Preferring life in a care facility over living with my mother-in-law, he asserted his decision firmly. My mother-in-law's reaction was unexpected. She laughed and declared her willingness to divorce as well, eager to return to her luxurious life. However, the situation took a dramatic turn when my grandfather made a call, announcing his termination of any contracts with a family like ours. It emerged that the major department store, run by my mother-in-law's brother, was on the brink of bankruptcy. He had been negotiating to exhibit and sell my grandfather's famous pottery, and the deal was close to finalization. However, a call from her brother, severing ties with her, left my mother-in-law stunned. Realizing the gravity of her situation, she began to plead for forgiveness, admitting her wrongdoing. At that moment, it became clear that change was inevitable. "I have nowhere else to go. Please let me stay here, Lily. I'm sorry. Please forgive me," my mother-in-law pleaded tearfully. But forgiveness seemed out of reach for us. We all coldly stared at her, unmoved by her tears. Yet amidst the tension, my husband seemed oblivious to the gravity of the situation. "I'm set to inherit this hospital. If you want a divorce, I'll pay alimony and child support. I'll marry someone younger and prettier than you," he said to me, his words laced with arrogance. However, my father-in-law interjected with a single sentence that changed everything. "The hospital has been sold," he declared, his eyes widening in shock. "What?" My husband's face drained of color as my father-in-law revealed that Terry had been orchestrating behind the scenes. "Get out of here right now," my father-in-law screamed at his stepson. My husband, not legally adopted by my father-in-law, had no claim to his assets. In contrast, I, legally adopted by my father-in-law, had been well cared for. Realizing the tide was turning against him, my husband quickly changed his tune, pleading for a fresh start with me, but I coldly dismissed him. Afterward, my son and I found solace and happiness at my grandparents' house. With each passing day, my son cried less, finding joy in playing outdoors. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings were finalized, the audio tape proving crucial in establishing my mother-in-law's fault. They now live in a small rented apartment, their attempts at finding new jobs faltering. On the other hand, my grandfather enjoys comfort in a high-end senior home, where we visit him often. Terry continues his passion for pottery under my grandfather's guidance. Remarkably, my brother found love at a pottery exhibition, dating a woman with a passion for pottery. As for me, I work as a nurse at a hospital near my grandfather's house, fulfilling my dream inspired by my mother's legacy.